You do nothing but watch my kids while I travel. Brooke's words hit like a slap, sharp, careless, and full of contempt. Helen stood frozen in the doorway, heart pounding, watching her daughter-in-law walk away without a backward glance. Little did Brooke know, Helen had been counting these moments, waiting for the right time to turn the tables. From here, the narrative will deepen into Helen's daily life, a quiet widow with hidden strength, the worn but comforting house in a suburban neighborhood, and the complex dynamics with her son Michael and children. Viewers will see Helen's resilience and feel the tension simmering beneath the surface, setting up a story of empowerment and family drama. If you're still here, welcome to Voice of Jenna, a place where stories aren't just told, they're felt. Here, we dive into real emotions, family drama, quiet heartbreaks, unexpected twists, and the moments that change us. So sit back, relax, and let me tell you what happened next. She said those words like they didn't matter. You do nothing but watch my kids while I travel. The slap of Brooke's voice echoed through the quiet kitchen, but Helen's eyes didn't waver. She knew this moment was just another scene in a longer play, one where she would no longer play the silent spectator. Helen stood tall despite the sting of those words. Her silver hair caught the morning light streaming through the window, framing a face etched with years of kindness, strength, and quiet battles won. At 63, she was a woman of routines, early mornings tending her garden, afternoons wrapped in the comforting pages of old novels, and evenings by the fireplace with a cup of chamomile tea. But beneath that calm surface was a resilience forged from decades of raising a family, losing a husband too soon, and carving out a life on her own terms. Their home, nestled in a quiet suburb peppered with maple trees, was a reflection of Helen herself, worn but welcoming. The walls carried echoes of laughter, of lessons taught, and of battles fought behind closed doors. Today, however, the air felt tight, charged with unspoken tensions. Helen's thoughts drifted briefly to Michael, her son, caught in the crossfires of Brooke's demands and her own desire to protect her family's peace. Brooke, with her sharp tongue and sharper ambitions, always seemed to see Helen as an obstacle rather than an ally. Yet, Helen had never let bitterness root in her heart. Instead, she tended it carefully, like the roses in her garden, pruned when necessary, nourished with hope. As Brooke's footsteps faded down the hallway, Helen's gaze hardened. This was a turning point, a quiet spark of what was to come. She wasn't just going to watch the story unfold anymore, she was planning to rewrite it. The kitchen clock ticked steadily, a metronome to the rising storm. Helen poured herself another cup of tea, savoring the warmth, gathering strength. The theme was clear: respect and boundaries in the crucible of family. Somewhere between caregiving and invisibility, Helen was about to claim her voice and forever change the dynamics at play. This was her story now, and it had only just begun. Every morning, Helen's day began the same way. The sharp scent of brewing coffee filled the sunlit kitchen as she opened the curtains to greet the neighborhood's chirping birds. The garden outside, though modest, was her sanctuary, the spot where roses bloomed stubbornly amid the chaos of life, and where she often found solace during sleepless nights. Today, however, the tranquility felt fragile, like a vase perched too close to the edge of a table. As Helen trimmed the unruly blooms, her mind wandered to Brooke's recent words, their harshness lingering like a shadow. It was the way Brooke looked at her too, as if Helen's years of sacrifice were invisible, as if watching her grandchildren was all she was good for. But Helen knew better. She had stories etched in every wrinkle, and a resolve that ran deeper than any garden route. Later, her son Michael stopped by after work. Though his voice was warm, there was a tension in his eyes, a hesitation she'd noticed growing over the months. "Mom," Brooke called again. "She's planning another trip. Think you can watch the kids?" His words hung between them, heavy with unspoken frustration and an unyielding sense of loyalty torn in two. Helen smiled softly, a crease forming near her eyes. "Michael, I love those kids more than anything. But I need you to understand this isn't easy for me anymore." They exchanged a quiet look, both aware of the shifting terrain underfoot. That afternoon, Helen took her youngest grandchildren to the local park. Their laughter filled the air, a bright contrast to the undercurrent of unease she felt. The children's restless energy mirrored the stirrings inside Helen, a mixture of love, weariness, and a brewing determination. In her cozy living room, surrounded by faded photographs and knickknacks gathered over decades, Helen's thoughts churned. She reflected on the years when her hopes had been simple, a family united, respect exchanged willingly. Now, that fragility was shattered by Brooke's indifference. Yet through it all, Helen's spirit remained unbroken, anchored by memories of resilience and lessons learned from hard-fought battles. As dusk deepened, mounting shadows crept along the walls. Helen sensed a storm coming, not just in the weather, but in the heart of her family. The first whispers of conflict stirred quietly, like distant thunder promising a reckoning. She sat by the window, listening to the soft rustle of leaves, knowing that soon her peaceful days would give way to a challenge she could no longer avoid. But Helen was ready, stronger than they'd ever imagined. This was just the beginning. You're just going to sit there and do nothing? That's all you ever do. Watch my kids while I travel. Brooke's voice was icy, slamming through the room like a slammed door. Helen's hands froze mid-sweat on the dishcloth, her pulse quickening. This was no ordinary request. It was a declaration, a challenge laid out in sharp lines. Brooke stood near the window, arms crossed, eyes flashing with impatience, as if Helen's presence was an inconvenience, not the backbone keeping the family afloat. The house felt colder all at once, the light dimmer, the brief calm from yesterday's quiet now shattered. Helen swallowed hard, measuring her words carefully. Brooke, I've cared for those children for years. It's not nothing. Her voice was steady, but beneath it churned years of unspoken frustrations. Strong marriages don't rest on one person's shoulders. Michael drifted into the kitchen, catching the tail end of the confrontation. His face tightened, a mix of guilt and exhaustion. Mom, please. Brooke's under a lot of stress. We all are. But Helen's gaze met Michael's with a quiet firmness that shaped his childhood. And I am too, Michael. This isn't easy for me. Her eyes softened, but the fire remained. She knew this clash was only the first ripple of a gathering storm. Brooke's laugh was sharp. Maybe if you took life less slowly, things would be easier for all of us. She shrugged, slamming her purse on the table before heading for the door. I'm leaving tomorrow. Make sure the kids are ready. Helen watched her go, the echo of the door closing searing the now heavy silence. She wrapped her arms around herself, steadying breath mingling with the fading light. This house, the safe haven she had built with patient hands, was becoming a battlefield. Later, as dusk swallowed the sky, Helen sat on the porch with an old photo album. Memories of a younger Michael, of simpler days, washed over her. The conflict wasn't just Brooke, it was the erosion of respect, the silent war creeping into every corner of her family's life. The distant hum of cars passing, the rustle of leaves in the cool evening air, it all became the soundtrack to Helen's gathering storm of resolve. She wasn't about to be sidelined, discarded like yesterday's news. Not anymore. With every turn of the album page, Helen's determination grew. The story unfolding was hers, and she was ready to face this challenge head-on. The quiet before the tempest was over. The reckoning had begun. Brooke's absence turned Helen's quiet home into a cage of noise and unrest. The children, unsettled and unruly, pushed Helen's patience to its limits. Every shouted reprimand felt like a battle cry, a fight she never wanted but couldn't avoid. The walls echoed with the echo of broken routines and fractured trust. Helen's mornings began with a fragile calm, but by afternoon, the house was chaos, crumbs underfoot, scattered toys, voices clashing like storm clouds. The youngest tugged at her sleeve, eyes wide with confusion, while old resentments simmered unseen beneath forced smiles. "Why won't they listen, Grandma?" whispered Emma, her 9-year-old granddaughter, voice trembling with frustration. Helen knelt beside her on the worn carpet, heart aching with the weight of expectations she never wanted to carry alone. "We're learning, sweetie. Sometimes it's hard when people don't feel safe," Helen murmured, reaching out to tuck a stray curl behind Emma's ear. Downstairs, Michael's call trembled through the quiet night. "Mom, I know it's hard, but Brooke's under pressure. Maybe if you softened." Helen's breath hitched. So much depended on holding firm. "I'm not softening, Michael," she said, voice steady. "If anything, I'm just getting started." In the kitchen, the scent of simmering soup mingled with the sharp tang of unspoken tension. Helen's thoughts drifted to Brooke's careless demands and her son's hesitant support. The family, once a sanctuary, now felt like shifting sand beneath her feet. Late that night, Helen sat by the window, watching stars blink through the cold pane. Her mind wrestled with doubts and resolve. How far would she have to go? What price would loyalty demand? The storm gathering in her heart mirrored the one rolling across the sky, a promise that the quiet struggles were just a prelude. The house creaked and sighed with secrets, waiting for the moment Helen would rise and meet the challenge head-on. Her story, threaded with love and strength, was unfolding, and the hardest battles were still to come. Helen sat quietly in her kitchen, the hum of the refrigerator mingling with the soft shuffles of her grandchildren's restless feet upstairs. Michael's voice on the phone earlier still lingered in her ears, his plea for understanding, tinged with frustration and exhaustion. It was a delicate balance between supporting her son and standing firm against Brooke's disregard. Her old friend, Martha, paid a surprise visit that afternoon, carrying a basket of freshly baked bread and a cautious smile. Their years of friendship
always put on a brave
deep,
face, Helen.
but today their conversation
Martha said gently,
tiptoed
pouring
around
tea.
unspoken tension.
But
I see the toll it's taking. Helen sighed, gazing out onto the garden bathed in late afternoon light. "It's hard," she admitted. "Not because of the children, they're wonderful, but because of Brooke. Her absence leaves a gap wider than I expected." Martha's eyes narrowed thoughtfully. "Have you talked to Michael lately? Sometimes sons don't see what's right in front of them until it's too late." Later, Helen found herself wrestling with a secret worry. Brooke's frequent, unexplained trips hinted at troubles deeper than mere apathy. The whisper she'd caught at the grocery store, the worried glances from neighbors, painted a sharper picture. The daughter-in-law's flawless facade was beginning to crack. Meanwhile, the grandchildren's behavior grew more challenging, a reflection perhaps of uncertainty at home. Helen's patience frayed in private moments, but her love never wavered. One evening, Michael stopped by with his daughter Emma. Their conversation was tense but honest, Michael admitting his own struggles balancing loyalty to Brooke and his mother, while Emma's quiet fear tugged at Helen's heart. As Helen prepared a simple dinner, the aroma of simmering stew contrasted sharply with the growing storm within her, a storm fueled by family fractures, hidden secrets, and the brewing need to confront uncomfortable truths. This tapestry of small interactions, secrets, and worries wove a complex subplot around Helen's main struggle. It deepened the emotional stakes, revealing the intricate dance of love, loyalty, and resilience that would soon face its hardest test. The rising tension was palpable, a quiet drumbeat before the inevitable crescendo. Helen never imagined betrayal would come wrapped in a daughter-in-law's careless smile. The day Helen discovered Brooke had been secretly manipulating Michael, and the children hit like a punch to the gut. It started with small lies, forgotten appointments, unexplained absences, but soon escalated to hidden phone calls and money diverted from the family budget. Helen sat at the kitchen table, trembling as she confronted the truth behind Brooke's seemingly perfect facade. How could she? Helen whispered to herself, pain and disbelief mingling in her chest. Every memory of Brooke's demands now twisted beneath the weight of deceit. Her inner thoughts raced. Was all the patience worth it? The nights helming the household, the silent caretaking, now overshadowed by Brooke's cunning game. And Michael, her son, caught between love for his wife and trust in his mother. Helen's heart ached, but her spirit flared. This betrayal was a test, a harsh reminder of the resilience she'd built over decades. Calls with Martha and whispered confidences with neighbors became her lifeline, each conversation stoking the quiet fire within. As tension spiraled, Helen weighed her next moves, knowing the fight ahead would be more than just words. The stakes rose, protecting her grandchildren, preserving family bonds, and reclaiming respect lost to manipulation. In the solitude of night, Helen's resolve crystallized. The woman who once watched quietly would now step boldly into a confrontation that would shift the family's fate. The battle lines were drawn, and Helen was ready to reclaim her place, not just as caretaker, but as guardian of truth. This turning point was more than a fracture. It was the forge that would shape Helen's transformation and power the approaching climax. Even as the sun dipped low, casting long shadows over her quiet house, Helen sat in thoughtful stillness by the window. The events swirling in her mind felt heavier than the autumn dusk settling around her. Memories, sharp and soft all at once, together formed a tapestry of her journey, past and present woven tightly beneath a skin weathered by life's storms. She thought of her early years, the laughter of her children mingling with the scent of home-cooked meals and the steady rhythm of small victories and setbacks as a young mother raised mostly alone. Those years had taught her to be patient, to bear burdens without complaint, and to find quiet strength in the act of giving. She had hoped that strength would be understood, even welcomed. But Brooke's arrival had unsettled that hope, unveiling cracks in what Helen once thought was an unshakable foundation. The sharpness of her daughter-in-law's words, the whispered doubts cast in the church pews, the subtle exclusions, it all echoed through the rooms like a haunting refrain. The tension between love and hurt pulled taut in Helen's heart. She realized her role had evolved from silent nurturer to a woman ready to claim her voice. Yet, doubts lingered just under the surface. Was she strong enough? Would her son stand fully beside her? Could truth truly heal these fractures? The rustle of leaves outside underscored the quiet urgency building within her. This was no longer a chapter of endurance, but one of transformation. Her reflections led to decisions crystallizing, a plan to protect her grandchildren, to mend what could be mended, and to face down the shadows that Brooke cast. In the flickering candlelight of her living room, Helen whispered a promise to herself, to rise, to speak, to reclaim her place, not just as a grandmother, but as a guardian of love, respect, and family. The final confrontation was on the horizon, steeped in all the hope, pain, and fierce resolve she carried. And Helen was ready. Helen stood in the quiet kitchen, the dim light casting long shadows that seemed to pull her deeper into thought. Her hands trembled slightly, not from weakness, but from the weight of what lay ahead. The game had changed. Brooke's sharpness, her relentless demands, had pushed Helen beyond the edge of patient acceptance. Michael's voice came through the phone again, softer this time, but laced with fatigue. "Mom, I wish Brooke would see how hard you're trying. Maybe it's time to talk, but carefully." Helen nodded slowly, though he couldn't see it. "I've been thinking the same. It's not just about watching the kids anymore. It's about respect, fairness. I'm making plans, Michael. It's time things changed." She flipped open an old notebook, pages yellowed with age and filled with notes about schedules, important dates, and subtle observations she'd quietly made over months. This wasn't about confrontation for its own sake. It was about protecting her grandchildren, preserving her dignity, and standing firm for what was right. Helen shared her plans with Martha the next day, her longtime ally and confidant. Martha's gaze was sharp, encouragement clear. "You have every right to stand strong, Helen. Brooke's underestimating you." Rising early, Helen began reorganizing her days, setting boundaries with lists and clear expectations. She rehearsed difficult conversations in front of the mirror, her voice growing firmer each time. When Brooke dropped by unannounced to check on the children, the air crackled. Helen greeted her with quiet confidence, outlining the new rules with calm determination. Brooke's dismissive smirk faltered. "Your days of taking advantage are over," Helen said softly. "This family deserves better." Behind the scenes, Helen leaned on Michael and Martha for support, their belief fueling her courage. The quiet warrior inside her was awakening, and with each step, The gap between endurance and action closed. The rising tension was palpable, but so was Helen's resolve. The storm was approaching, and she was ready to face it head-on. The final act was drawing near. The air in Helen's living room was thick with unspoken words and the faint scent of coffee cooling on the table. Brooke had arrived unexpectedly, her sharp gaze slicing through the calm Helen had carefully constructed. Michael stayed close but silent, the tension curling between the three like smoke. "You think you can just take over, control everything? That's not how this family works," Brooke spat, pacing with restless energy that filled the small room. Her words were laced with frustration, fear masked as fury. Helen met her eyes, steady. "I'm not here to control. I'm here because it's my family, because there are promises made, boundaries crossed." Her voice was calm but firm. Years of silent endurance had forged this quiet strength. Brooke scoffed, crossing her arms. "Promises? Boundaries? You say that like you're some kind of victim." "No," Helen said softly, but with steel beneath the softness. "I say it because I'm tired of being invisible. Because love without respect doesn't last." Michael shifted uneasily. "Enough," he broke in, voice hollow. "Please. We need to talk this through." Outside, the wind pressed against the windows, a low howl that mirrored the storm brewing inside. Helen's gaze flicked to the children's laughter echoing faintly from the backyard, a stark contrast to the fracture widening here. In this crucible, Helen's character reached a turning point. The years of seated patience and quiet sacrifice gave way to bold conviction. The moment brimmed with raw emotion, unresolved wounds, and a flicker of hope, the beginning of things mending or shattering. Minutes stretched, breaths held, as each faced the unvarnished truths between them. Sensory details, the creak of the faded wooden floor, the bitter tang of tension in the air, heightened the immediacy. The story stood at a precipice. Helen, beneath the weight of betrayal, prepared to fight for what was hers. Brooke, bristling with defiance, and Michael, caught between loyalties. The final act edged closer, every heartbeat a drumroll to the inevitable reckoning. The house was thick with tension as Helen faced Brooke one last time, their voices low but charged with everything unsaid over months. Brooke's lips tightened, her usual sharp retorts softened by the unmistakable weight now pressing down on them both. Michael stood nearby, torn between the two, his grip on Helen's hand steady yet trembling. Helen's voice was clear, unwavering. "This ends now. Your visits may be few, but your impact has been many. I won't let you unravel what I've fought to build, for my grandchildren, for this family." Brooke's eyes flashed anger, but also a flicker of recognition. "You think you can just step in and fix everything? This isn't your fight." "But it is," Helen replied, strength woven into every word. "It's mine as much as anyone's. Because love without respect isn't love at all." The air carried the lingering scent of the day's rain, seeping through cracked windows, grounding them in the raw reality of this confrontation. Outside, the children's laughter faded into quiet, the storm passed. But within, Helen felt a surge of calm, the release of years' worth of silent pain. This moment marked a profound transformation. Helen, once patient and unseen, now stood tall, her voice a beacon of resilience and newfound power. Brooke's facade cracked further, no longer immune to the consequences of her choices. Michael stepped forward, his words a bridge between factions. "We have a choice, to heal or to fracture beyond repair. It's time to choose." Helen's heart swelled with the hope that this choice would be healing, that respect and understanding could finally take root. The climax had been reached, and with it, the promise of renewal. In the stillness that followed, Helen whispered a silent vow: to protect, to nurture, and to never again allow silence where voices were needed most. The story had turned its final page, but its lessons of strength, boundaries, and love would echo in the family's future. Helen's journey was one of profound growth, from quiet endurance to powerful resolve, a testament to the enduring spirit of family. The household was quiet in the days after the confrontation, but the silence was brimming with change. Helen moved through familiar rooms now charged with new energy, a mixture of relief and cautious hope. The children, sensing the shift, clung more readily to her comforting presence, their laughter slowly returning like fragile blossoms after a harsh winter. Michael stopped by often, his expression softer, more present. He and Helen shared quiet conversations about healing old wounds and shaping a future where respect and love could coexist without shadows of past wounds. "We're finally on the same page," he said one evening, offering a tentative smile that warmed Helen's tired heart. Brooke's visits dwindled, her absence a tacit acknowledgement of consequences faced. Though still distant, a tentative peace settled, allowing Helen space to rebuild not only her home, but also her spirit. In reflection, Helen realized the journey had been as much about reclaiming her own voice as protecting her family. The lessons of boundaries and courage were etched deep, transforming her from the silent caretaker to a woman who could stand unyielding, yet tender. A conversation with Martha on the porch, under the soft glow of twilight, wove closure and hope. "Sometimes the fiercest battles bring the brightest dawns," Martha mused. Helen nodded, watching cherry blossoms stir in the gentle breeze. "And love, real love, holds us all, even when it hurts." The story's echoes lingered in the rooms, a testament to resilience and the power of speaking one's truth. Helen's path forward shone clear, a future built on strength, forgiveness, and the unbreakable ties of family. The house, once a battlefield of whispered betrayals and silent storms, now breathed with the soft, steady rhythm of healing. Helen stood at the window, her fingers tracing the delicate frost that glistened on the pane, a quiet reminder of the cold that had passed and the warmth slowly returning. Her transformation was palpable. The woman who had once accepted invisibility now walked with an unyielding resolve, her voice a testament to years of resilience. The lessons etched in each wrinkle, the cost of boundaries, the power of truth, and the courage to stand, had carved a new Helen, one both tender and unbreakable. Michael's presence by her side was fuller now, no longer caught between loyalties, but united in purpose. "Mom, you changed everything. For all of us," he said, his eyes reflecting gratitude and newfound respect. As for Brooke, the consequences of her choices echoed in her absence, a silence more telling than any confrontation. The family's fractures began to mend not by erasing past hurts, but by weaving new patterns of understanding, respect, and honest communication. Helen's heart swelled with a bittersweet joy as she watched her grandchildren play in the garden, laughter spilling over like warm sunlight. The journey they'd taken had not been easy, but in the crucible of conflict, love had found its strongest form. She whispered a quiet vow to the chill morning air. "This is not the end. It's the beginning of everything I hoped for." The story closed with a sense of completion and hope, reinforcing themes of strength, redemption, and the unshakable bonds of family. Helen's arc, from silence to strength, from being sidelined to leading with conviction, was fully realized. And though this chapter ended, the echoes of her courage promised stories yet to be told. The scent of pine and fresh earth filled the air, marking a new dawn. Helen smiled, ready to embrace whatever tomorrow might bring, her spirit forever unyielding and alive. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to subscribe to Voice of Jenna so you never miss the next chapter in our world of twists, lessons, and unforgettable moments. Your support means the world to me, and trust me, the stories only get better from here.